Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 300. And the crowd goes nuts. Okay, that's enough of the All Dolphins podcast. This is the part where if this was a high-end, big, high-tech, big production show, we'd have all sorts of bells and whistles. Instead, you have myself, Alain Poupart, and Christopher Perkins from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. How are you, Perk?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Saw Jimmy Johnson over the weekend, so I'm living good.
Yes, you did. And we're going to talk about Jimmy Johnson and Finn's weekend. We're going to talk about the Justin Jefferson contract extension coming on the heels of the Jalen Waddle contract extension and what that means for one Tyreek Hill, if it means anything at all. We're going to look ahead to the Minicamp, which starts on Tuesday and as the final event of the offseason program. However, first off, I'm going to start. There will be a quick history lesson. I'm going to start by thanking everyone who has been watching from the start. Now that I have made it to this milestone of 300, it's a very nice round number. Yeah. Appreciate everyone who has watched any episode, particularly those who have watched every episode. Big heart, if it can do it for me now. There we go. The big heart.
All right, man.
Big thank you. You guys are the ones we do this for. So again, can't thank you enough. Please like, subscribe. I had to say that. Quick history lesson 300 was correspond now to the year 2000 because we got the double zeros at the end. And as Perk and I were talking beforehand, a lot happened in that season. Yeah. Quickly in the draft, Dolphins didn't have a first-round pick. They wound up taking tackle Todd Wade from Mississippi with their first pick in the second round. And he was a solid, serviceable starting right tackle for 4 seasons before he left with Houston. Season was up and down. This was Dave Wanstead's first year as head coach after replacing Jimmy Johnson. Began with a bang, 23-0 shutout of the Seattle Seahawks on a day where Lamar Smith, a newcomer who had signed as a free agent, rushed for over 100 yards. And that would kind of set a tone for that season. Lamar Smith wound up rushing for over 1,000 yards that year. And, of course, there was a big game in the playoffs, which we'll get to very quickly. In the middle of the season, there was one of the most memorable Dolphin games ever, and maybe not for the right reasons. I'm talking about, of course, the Monday Night Miracle, or the whatever they called it, in a Giant Stadium, because it wasn't great for the Dolphins. They were up 30-7 heading into the fourth quarter. There was a deep pass from Vinny Testaverde. I believe I want to say it's to Wayne Corbett or Laveranues Coles in the corner of the end zone. Sam Madison was in perfect coverage, great position to make the pick. Somehow he couldn't handle the ball. He bounced up, went in through his arms into the hands of the Jets wide receiver. I think it was Laveranues Coles to start the ridiculous comeback. Dolphins wound up losing 40-37 in overtime. That could have been a soul-crushing loss that could have derailed the season. Big props to the Dolphins. They came back the following week, beat the Green Bay Packers, and they were like lethargic, lackluster in that game until they got a punt return for a touchdown by Jeff Ogden.
Yep.
Dolphins wound up making the playoffs, winning the AFC East on the last day of the regular season at New England. And again, another very bizarre chapter where Orlando Murray kicks a late game-winning field goal. Dolphins celebrate. They go in the locker room. Woohoo, we won the AFC East. Not so fast there because they had been one Hail Mary by the Patriots. They decided that more time needed to be put back on the clock. So about half an hour, half the guys have already showered, bring everybody back to the field for one last play. And by that time, the Patriots brought back Michael Bishop to throw that last pass, not Drew Bledsoe. And it fell incomplete again. And the Dolphins, for the second time, had their division clinching win. And then the playoff game against the Indianapolis Colts, Lamar Smith, 209 yards, game-winning touchdown in overtime. Last Dolphin playoff victory. Not one since. The following week, they play at Oakland. Lamar Smith's completely gassed. First drive, the Dolphins move the ball very well. They're about the Raiders' 30-yard line, I want to say. Mm-hmm. Jay Fiedler throws an out ball. Believe it is Torrin Dorn, I believe was the one. Steps in front of it, picks it off. Pick six, 27-0 final, and that was it. So I apologize for monopolizing the first 4 minutes of the podcast. Perk, what are your thoughts on the year 2000?
Great stuff, man. That was my first year on the beat. I remember all those games that you described, and I remember the kind of the eerie sight of the Dan Marino locker that was encased in glass or in plastic plexiglass in the locker room, and it was just kind of bizarre walking by that thing because obviously Dan was still with us and is still with us, but it was just kind of a bizarre thing. I think that might have also been the season where Dave hung the lobster traps before a Jets game, saying it's a trap game. I think that might have been that season, or maybe it was 2001. But anyway, great 2000 season. I remember those games. Remember the playoff victory. Good year.
No, that was fun too, and we should mention the Dan Marino retirement. I was remiss for not mentioning that he retired on March 9th, I want to say. Mm-hmm. There was a quote-unquote battle for the starting job between Damon Heward, who had started some games in 1999, and Jay Fiedler, who they had signed as a free agent from Jacksonville. Fiedler won the job. And in week 3, I want to say was, the Dolphins had a Sunday night home game against the Baltimore Ravens, during which they honored Dan Marino. I think they might have retired his jersey right then and there. So. And the Dolphins won that game pretty easily against a team that would go on to win the Super Bowl, that ridiculous Baltimore team with that stupid, crazy defense. Yep. Okay, so that was 2000. Let's move forward to 2024. There's stuff to talk about from this weekend, from today, and then from starting tomorrow. So let's go start. We'll do chronologically. So Saturday, the Dolphins held their Fins Weekend annual fishing event. Perk, as you mentioned, you were there in Coconut Grove. Jimmy Johnson was on hand. I know among the players, Zach Sealer, Brandon Peely. Who's the third guy escapes me right now.
Cam Brown, the rookie linebacker.
There you go, Cam Brown. No, actually a free agent linebacker they got from the Giants.
Yes.
Jimmy Johnson had some very complimentary things to say about the Dolphins and about Tua, and this is where I let you take over.
Yeah, so, Jimmy was there. He was in a good mood. It was me and somebody from the Palm Beach Post, a freelancer, Mark Berman. He covered the New York Knicks for a long time for the New York Post, like 23 years, I believe it was. So we were the only ones there. And as soon as Jimmy walks in, he looks at us and he goes, "Where can I get a cold Heineken?" I don't know, Jimmy. We're media people, but eventually they told us about the fishing tournament, choppy waters. A lot of the players pulled out the night before. Some of them didn't go right. Yeah, exactly. Some of them didn't go all the way and do the whole thing because there was a few of them lost their lunch, but Jimmy was very complimentary about Mike McDaniel, said he likes the way that he runs the offense, said that he's got the respect of the players, and that's one of the first things that you have to have. On Tua, he said that, he thinks that Tua is going to have a good year, but he was really high on Terry Bradshaw being high on Tua, saying that, as soon as Terry saw Tua, he said that this guy is going to be a good one. And so far, that has followed through. Jimmy said he was disappointed that the Dolphins didn't go further last year. He blamed that on the defensive injuries, saying if they didn't have those defensive injuries, he thinks they would have had a better season. He's looking forward to this season. He's hopeful that the Dolphins will win a playoff game this season. But overall, Jimmy Johnson, very complimentary of the team, of the speed. He specifically mentioned the offense with Waddle and Tyreek Hill and Tua and Mike McDaniel running the show. So Jimmy Johnson, very optimistic about this Dolphins team this season.
And for those not aware, Jimmy Johnson's been a longtime resident of the Keys, pretty much once his NFL coaching career ended. After that 95 season with the Dallas Cowboys, he booked it to the Keys and has been living there. I think I read somewhere, I may have been your story or the other gentleman's story, that he doesn't fish as much as he used to, but he's enjoying that Keys life. And if you've ever been to the Keys, it's completely different than anything else in South Florida. In fact, family and I are heading there in a couple of weekends. Love the Keys. Nice. And as a personal note, first time I ever went deep sea fishing, where I was like with my family, brothers, sisters, and dad. It's not something my mother would do, and it was choppy waters, and the boat was going like this, and everybody in the family. I'll raise my hand and take pride in the fact that I didn't lose my lunch, as you said, or played with Uncle Ralph. But my siblings couldn't handle it. It can get a little bit nauseating, so to speak, when that boat starts moving like this. And obviously, Jimmy Johnson, 4-year head coach of the Dolphins, 96 through 99, and still does his work as Fox at Fox. So, look, his point about the injuries on defense derailing the season last year has some validity, but I think to say that was the only reason, I don't think that's accurate, because the offense wasn't pulling its weight down the stretch, and that's just a fact.
Yep. And by the way, Sean Wooden, speaking of the 2000 season, he was also out there. Sean, good veteran safety for the Dolphins, played 3 seasons, right? 96 to 99 for the Dolphins, or maybe it was 96 to 2000, maybe, or 2001, something like that. Went to Chicago, came back to the Dolphins, if I'm not mistaken, and finished his career. He's now working with the NFL, going overseas, talking to troops. So he had recently done that, and I talked to him about that. I asked Jimmy, what do you remember about this guy? And he goes, he knocked you on your ass, and I liked it. And so it was a good time. I'll tell you one thing about Sean Wooden, and I talked to Sean about this. One of my most vivid memories of the NFL and just how cruel and cutthroat this league is, I'll never forget in the 2000 season, I think it was, Sean Wooden going through the locker room like he could barely walk. He had 2 sprained ankles, and he's got 2 walking boots, and he can barely walk. Mm-hmm. And I'm just looking at this dude like, I know you can't miss a game for a sprained ankle, but 2 sprained ankles, dude, you can't even walk. And of course he played. He played that week. It is a brutal, brutal league. This dude could not even support himself, and he was out there on Sunday, because if you don't, you could lose your job. Brutal league, but Sean Wooden, good guy from Notre Dame, 6th round pick, one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, very good dude. You also sound like somebody would have had no issue playing for Vic Fangio last year.
Right.
Just saying.
I like that.
Thank you. Very, very subtle, right?
Yeah, okay. Very subtle.
So that was Saturday. Then on Monday came the news of Justin Jefferson, the star wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings, getting a 4-year contract extension tacked on to the 1 year he had left. $140 million, I believe it's $118 guaranteed. A good deal, so to speak, for Mr. Jefferson. Did very well for himself. And again, this comes on the heels of Jalen Waddle's contract extension late last weekend. And also in between that, we had Drew Rosenhaus doing his regular spot on WSVN with our good friend Josh Moser, where he basically kind of confirmed what I think all of us pretty much knew, that Tyreek wants a new deal. Yep. And then I saw a story, I think it was Adam Schefter, who was suggesting that now there's a framework for what the Dolphins can do with Tyreek. But here's my thing, though. Like, the Dolphins really, are we suggesting the Dolphins didn't know that there were a bunch of wide receivers who were coming up with big contracts this year, i.e. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, and all that?
Yep.
Are we suspecting they didn't do anything with this contract beforehand when they needed the cap space, but now that Justin Jefferson did get a contract, now they're going to do something? I don't know. It doesn't really add up to me.
No, I think the Dolphins are going to let this thing play out this season, and after that, I really don't know what happens to Tyreek. I mean, I think that, look, Tyreek, as we both have agreed, he is the man for this offense. Shifting off of that, I think we talked about this last time I was on the show, like going away from the speed element would be very difficult, because that's Tua's passing game. That's their passing game. The timing rather, the offensive line maintaining their blocks. They don't have to do it for very long because of the speed and the timing there. If Tyreek leaves, a lot of that changes. And so I think Tyreek knows that, but the Dolphins also have to take the stance that we can't let Tyreek hold us hostage like that. That, we've still got to do something with Tua and his contract, still got to do something with Javon Holland and his contract. There's no big rush to do Jalen Phillips, but that's lurking. So I think you just kind of see what happens this season as far as Tyreek. Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase, what they're going to get kind of doesn't affect Tyreek, because Tyreek is going to be 32, right, when this contract gets done. I don't know how many years you want to go on a speedy receiver at 32 years old.
No, I agree. And again, to me, I can't get past the fact that of all the contracts the Dolphins could manipulate, maneuver, extend, restructure, whatever, early in the offseason to create what was much needed cap space. I think Tyreek would have been the simplest to redo, because he's got no guaranteed money beyond this year. And you could have extended him, with a signing bonus, tack on some void years at the end like they've done with other guys to spread it out, reduce his cap number and all that. And they didn't do it. And I can't get past that fact that they didn't do it then when they knew those contracts were coming up. So why would they do it now? And whatever has been out there, I mean, who's to say that that's not agent driven?
Right. And then,
the fact is it is.
It is. And look, I think the Dolphins have been pretty good about the contracts in the rebuild era, which we could say started in 2019 with Christian Wilkins. And you did lose Wilkins for contract reasons. Van Ginkel, that could have been injury related. You definitely let Xavier Howard go for money reasons. I want to see what happens with some of these other guys that come up. I think the Dolphins have done a pretty good job with planning. You can't keep everybody. And some of our guys that we saw leave, Rob Hunt, Christian Wilkins, probably overpaid. God bless them. Nothing against them. But if I was the Dolphins, I wouldn't have matched those contracts. So I'm putting my faith. This is a long way of saying I'm putting my faith in the Dolphins regarding Tyreek. The vast majority of the major decisions they've made the last 5 years, I think, have been right on point. They've been pretty good. So I think they probably have a good thing in mind here with Tyreek, with just kind of letting this thing play out and see what happens at the end of this season.
Yeah, and to me, my bottom line, and to close the chapter, this chapter on Tyreek, on the Tyreek discussion, is if the Dolphins were absolutely certain that they wanted to move forward with Tyreek for another 1, 2, or 3 years, they would have extended him or restructured his contract this offseason. And in the meantime, they did nothing to it. They restructured Jalen Ramsey and then extended and added void years to spread out the signing bonus with Durham Smythe. And they did it with Alec Ingold. They restructured Teron Armstead and asked him to take a pay cut. So if they were, again, 100% sure they wanted to do something with Tyreek beyond this year, they would have done it already. That's
quick question, Poop. Do you think off-field antics, behavior, actions are a factor? I think they could be as a tiebreaker. I don't think they are right now. That's my stance.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, only they could answer that. But I'm not sure. Is it possible? Yes, absolutely, it's possible.
Yeah, it's possible.
I'm not sure. Okay, let's move on to now looking ahead.
Yeah.
Minicamp. First of all, how hard has it been for you to contain your excitement over this?
You know what? Well, I'll say this, Poop. It's mandatory, so I am excited to see who's out there and who's working. But my enthusiasm, that's a little bit tempered, because I know that the Dolphins kind of have these schedules for different guys. Like, we know Teron Armstead is not going to be out there all 3 days doing stuff, right? So I don't know about OBJ. I don't know about Jalen Ramsey. I don't know about Tyreek. I don't know about Mostert. So my excitement is kind of tempered. I do think that there are position groups that we can learn stuff from, even though they're not in pads, right? The running backs, the cornerbacks, the safeties, a little bit about the edge rusher, quarterback, tight end. But I just don't know who's going to be participating. I'm looking forward to seeing this team on the field, even in minicamp, but I just don't know how many of the key players are going to be participating all 3 days.
Yeah, and that's me being a smartass. I mean, and sometimes I can't help it. Yeah, because I'm like, it's not necessarily, it's not exciting stuff. I mean, it's a practice, but yeah, there's a curiosity factor. Again, depending on who works out, I don't think Teron Armstead is going to forget all 3 days. I don't think he's going to do anything personally.
Probably not.
Starting with the fact he doesn't need to. It's also not impossible that one or two more of those guys won't be there and it will be an excused absence. For example, we know Jalen Ramsey, per his words on his first vlog his off-season vlog that he did, was going to work out in Tennessee. Would you be shocked if he was still in Tennessee for the mini camp and the Dolphins said, okay, no, don't worry about it. So that's possible. I think as much as anything else, what's going to be interesting is talking to some of those guys that we haven't talked to since the end of last season, or the newcomers. For example, we're going to talk to Jalen Waddle, I would assume, about his new contract. Tua was a guy who logically will be speaking. He spoke during minicamp last year. I don't recall 2 years ago. And my guess is he's not going to want to talk about anything contract related, but there are other topics to discuss with him, the weight loss, working with a QB coach, and the addition of Beckham as well. I'm curious to see if Odell Beckham is going to work and what he looks like. As far as the end of the season, relatively healthy last year. And then you got the young guys as well to see, who looks like he could be, some kind of a contributor. Chop Robinson's a guy I'm going to have my eyeballs on always. Patrick Paul, I'm going to guess, could get a lot of reps with the first team offensive line. Again, there's no live contact, so it's kind of difficult to gauge. Who else?
I want to see Jalen Wright. I want to see Devon Achane with his weight gain. I want to see if Chris Brooks is out there. We aren't going to see his power running, but I just want to see him out there. I want to see. I want to see the kickoff returners. I don't know how much they're going to do in that formation, but I want to see who the guys out there are. Is Tyreek going to be a candidate? I don't think we would see him out there either way in minicamp. Is Waddle going to be a candidate? I don't think we would see him out there either way during minicamp. But Achane could be out there. Berrios could be out there. Jalen Wright could be out there. I want to kind of see how this thing sets up and the shiftiness of the guys that are back there. You'll be able to see a couple of things from the kickoff return. Shiftiness and how guys move and things like that. No final decisions, obviously, with no pads. But I think if they show us anything, you could probably draw some small conclusions about who fits in that kickoff return role.
No, that's a good point. Here's something else I'm going to be on the lookout for. Not that I expect it's going to happen, but even in minicamp and in training camp, if anybody other than Jason Sanders does the kicking off, and I say that because of what the Kansas City Chiefs special teams coordinator said, whose name escapes me, that he may look to not use Harrison Butker, their kicker, but rather Justin Reed, who's a safety with some kicking ability, because chances are your kicker is going to be asked to tackle more often than he would previously. And now the question is, do the Dolphins have a DB or linebacker type who can tackle but also kick? Because, again, the ball has to land in that landing area, aptly named, between the goal line and the 25. Although you're kicking off from midfield now, right?
I can't remember where you kick off from. But yeah, that's going to be very interesting. Nobody comes to mind. We remember that Cedric Wilson 2 years ago was the emergency third quarterback. I don't know that we ever got. Was Christian Wilkins mentioned as an emergency kicker or punter at one point, or was that just joking around?
It's a good one. I remember who was there was an offensive lineman who was it Tunsil who was catching punts like one time in practice. And Dominican Sue, I think. Dominican Sue, I remember, I think was toying, playing around and doing some kicking as well when he was with the Dolphins. But if you look at the DBs, I could see Javon Holland. Javon Holland who's picked up golf and apparently told us what was he say? He shot an 86 like a month after he started playing.
I hate great athletes. 80s. I've never shot an 86. These freaking great athletes, they can do anything, man. It just pisses me off. Hey, by the way, one other thing on minicamp, Anthony Weaver. I don't know what the defense will show us as far as Nick Needham at safety or corner, or how much they're going to go too deep. They're not going to show us that. But just different if they show us any pass rush packages, 3 pass rushers up front or something like that. I'll be looking for that. I don't expect them to show us anything very serious. But, just some things that Anthony Weaver does show us as far as, tendencies and how he intends to do things a little bit differently than Vic Fangio. Blitz packages, 2 deep safeties, 8 men in the box. What maybe he'll show us some stuff like that.
Yeah, I think we will see some things. I think here's the thing is, and this is the thing every time a new DC comes in, is generally speaking, you're going to get a little bit of everything.
Yep.
And then once preseason and the regular season arrive, then it's like they zone in on what they really like to do.
Right.
And it's kind of like a little snippets of things that you have seen, generally speaking. So I think we have sort of kind of an idea of what the defense is going to look like, but we won't know for sure until the regular season starts. Because again, Anthony Weaver has 1 year of DC experience under his belt, and I hate that cliche. Cliche alert, ding. He has 1 year of DC experience on his resume.
There you go.
Better, thank you.
There you go.
That's what was with Houston in 2020, and injuries kind of derailed everything he wanted to do. I believe they even changed their usual lineup formation because of injuries. And then working as a D-line coach under different guys in Baltimore the last couple of years, including Mike McDonald last year, you figure that he's going to take a lot of the things they did there, which works so well, but also want to throw in his own little wrinkles as well.
Poop, I know we're up against the clock. What would you like to see offensively, and what do you think they would show us? For me, at the top of the list of what they could realistically show us is using the tight end differently, and especially because you've got Jonnu Smith, maybe more seam routes or different routes with the tight end. I don't know how much more they could show us realistically, especially considering we don't think like Teron will be out there, or Tyreek very much, or Waddle very much. But the way that you use the running backs, the way that you use the tight ends, maybe some formation things, I will be looking for something from that offense, some kind of a wrinkle that they show. I don't know if we're smart enough to detect it. It might be very subtle, but I know I'll be looking. I'll be trying to learn something. I know, right?
Yeah, but again, that's kind of the same thing. I think they'll work on a whole bunch of different things, and then narrow the focus the closer you get to the regular season. To me, the guys I always want to see at this time of year are guys who I don't necessarily know what to expect, or I don't know as well as others. Like, for example, I'm curious to see Odell Beckham Jr., even though I know what kind of receiver he is. I want to see him develop that timing and that rhythm with Tua. And among the newcomers, Jordy Fortson's a guy who I'm very, very intrigued by. I want to see what he's going to do. And I want to see him you stack good practice after good practice. We've seen him twice. And in the first practice, I was like, oh, yeah. And then the second practice, he wasn't noticeable. And part of that is, sometimes that's where the ball is going, and sometimes it doesn't go your way. Sometimes it does. But I'm very, very intrigued by him. We haven't seen Jonnu Smith yet, so we don't know exactly how he fits into this offense. We had a story on SI.com/NFL/Dolphins, as you see under my name there, about Durham Smythe and the fact that, the Dolphins brought in all these new tight ends, but I think if we're thinking Durham Smythe's all of a sudden going to disappear, I don't think that's accurate in the least. So he's a guy that I'm really, the rest of the guys on offense. I mean, I've seen Izukama through 2 practices, and I've liked what I've seen. And it looks the same to me as he did last summer. He's a guy who I think's got interesting possibilities. And this notion of dismissing him from making the team because the Dolphins selected 2 wide receivers in the draft, I'm not on board with that. And then defensively, a bunch of young players: Chop Robinson, Mo Camara. I'm interested in seeing Cam Smith always.
Yes.
And he talked last week about this being a fresh start, which is what he had told us after the playoff loss at Kansas City as well.
I do want to see, Poop, if there is a battle for the starting corner opposite of Jalen Ramsey, or if Kendall Fuller comes in as the starter and they take a look at Cater and Cam Smith, or if they're just going to look at Kendall Fuller and Cam Smith, and Cater is definitely the slot. I do want to kind of see how that shakes out again. I don't know how much we'll be able to tell from this mini camp, but just alignment, who goes out there with the first team and things like that, and what positions they play in 7-on-7 could give us a little hint on how they're thinking at that corner opposite Jalen Ramsey. And
this is the part where I mentioned, and that applies to you as well on your show on the Sun-Sentinel.com, is we will be able to see it. We will not be able to report it. That's against reporting policies. So just so you'll know, if we bring that up, we're talking about for our own benefit. So don't be upset if we're like, well, those guys were talking on the show about what we're going to see. What did you see? Certain things we're not allowed to report. I think Kendall Fuller to me would be pretty much not penciled in, but penned in as the starting cornerback opposite Jalen Ramsey, unless, and this is where his versatility could come into play, and he's got some slot ability and as well as some safety ability.
Right.
Even though I would still think he's going to line up at cornerback, likely with Cater and Nick Needham battling it out for the slot position, with Jordan Poyer and Javon Holland as your starting safeties, unless somebody else comes into the mix at safety, or unless there's some movement elsewhere. But I think, and there's another guy, Kendall Fuller, who we haven't seen yet because he was not there at either of the 2 OTAs. So there'll be a lot to watch. And I think that's going to wrap it up. I think that's going to wrap up episode 300 again. 300.
Hey,
there you go. Perk, as always, thank you very much. I will see you on Tuesday at the minicamp. We will be here all week after every practice to provide insight on everything that we observed. Until then, thanks again for watching. Please please subscribe. Follow my man Perk at Chris Perk. Also read his stuff at South Florida Sun-Sentinel. The website is what? Just Sun-Sentinel.com?
Sun-Sentinel.com, and go Panthers.
Excellent. There you go. On that note, thanks everyone.